Well, hello, creatives, community, and kind folks. Welcome to RPG with DBJ. I'm so glad you could make it. I am your host, DBJ, and we're surrounded by many people with their dice and their character sheets who've shown up before the game starts. We're here just to talk about tabletop RPGs. And just to give you a little bit of an overview, this show is a podcast. We do it Monday through Friday. We take a subject. This week we're talking about um, uh, Wakanda and Black Panther and a bit of Chadwick Boseman because of his untimely passing over this past weekend. And so I thought we would dedicate this week in this subject to an individual who has taken part in a creative endeavor that has had an impact on my life. But we talk about tabletop RPGs, so forgive me if we don't go too far into the personal life of this actor that brought this very important character to life for my experiences. But instead, we talk about gaming and the gaming environment. Now, for those who don't know, we take the subject, we talk about Wakanda, and we'll subdivide that subject, whatever we're talking about, whether it's something like Medusas and giants or spells or random encounters or whatever the case may be. But on Thursday, third pillar of exploration Thursday is it's kind of like my baby. I love talking about exploration and the environment, and makes perfect sense for a hidden African jungle community, and we could talk about all those things. But I also want to blend in some of the action scenes from the Black Panther movie into this too, because I don't limit myself when it comes to exploration. Lastly, for those who do not know, this show is simulcast on 3 platforms. We go live stream on YouTube, Twitch, and the audio gets punched out to our own Discord server. Of course, you can absolutely just look down below the video, join our Discord server, and on the left, slide all the way down to the boiler room, because, of course, that's where all the cool kids hang out. Now, exploration takes on a number of identities when brought into the tabletop RPG community. The broadest of which, and it was actually somewhat expressed in the movie Black Panther, is the purity of exploration. It is taking a backpack, going out into the wild, and walking out into the unknown. What we kind of call a hex crawl sometimes. Nothing wrong with that. As a matter of fact, the country of Wakanda, some people may not even be able to find it on a map because it's fictional. And also the idea that it is a hidden away enclave in a mountain valley or a pass or something with a high tech force field and chameleonized nation and whatnot, which is pretty damn powerful. But I love it anyway. So exploration through the savannah or jungles or mountains or whatnot. It's pretty important, I think, in tabletop RPGs, especially fantasy-wise, right? And I think sometimes we want to rush to get to the front door of the next adventure or dungeon without making exploring the unknown an adventure unto itself. And part of that reasoning, I think, is just because of we've attributed traits and details to exploration that aren't there, but we've just assumed that they're there. For example, random encounters, assuming that random encounters A all have to be combat encounters, and that B, that random encounters have nothing to do with the story that we're trying to tell, or that an adventure or a dungeon is specifically something that's in, a gridded room that's underground, and there's no possibility of making an above ground dungeon or adventure where, one scene can lead to another. in the open air just as easily. It's the 5-room dungeon idea, right? Where you can have, instead of walking through yet another door, you can go to another area of a realm, travel a couple of kilometers or miles, and you find a monolith, and then you go through an ancient valley, and you find a tribe there, and then you cross a raging river, and maybe you find something else on the other side, and your interactions with everything previous to you getting to the next encounter might have an impact. You might be tracked by dangerous predators, or they may be tribal individuals trying to hunt you down, or there are predators who can smell the blood and gristle left on your weapons because you've just killed their food source and whatnot. So any number of those things could be possible in exploration. When it comes to using the environment, I think giving the environment a handful of traits is very important, and quite easily allows you to surpass another problem when it comes to exploration, which are like traps and puzzles, right? Um, uh, you can use your Google Food to look up puzzles, and oftentimes those are like classic puzzles. Either like they are physical puzzles, like cubes and things of that nature, or they are puzzle-like riddles that usually only have one answer. But instead, what you can do is you can apply problems and then let the players figure it out. Going back to the raging river, you're trudging through the jungle, you get to a raging river, the PCs are carrying heavy equipment or something. They have to get it across the raging river. How do they do it? Well, is there one answer? No, they can come up with any number of ideas. Or they could circumvent it completely. Maybe they go out of their way. They take a 3-day travel to go upriver so that they don't have to cross the most dangerous part of the river. That's a way to circumvent it, although it might extend their time. They could, cast a rope across it, or use some kind of spell-like effect, or the druid can shape change. Someone, all those kind of things. There's so many ways to solve the problem, and really putting problems in front of the PCs and letting the players figure out how to get past it is far more entertaining than putting a Rubik's cube on the table and saying you can't continue the game until somebody figures this out. Now, other elements of exploration are the environment itself. How long does it take you to get through a jungle? What kind of effects can happen to you? Can a humidity cause exhaustion? Is it possible to catch a disease or become infected by something? The weather is very important. Maybe you can foreshadow torrential rain or storm. So you have all of those things. And I think, unfortunately, 5th edition doesn't really pretend itself to have long-term conditional effects, but they can still be a threat in the background, especially if those same PCs are being hunted by predators, and there's a chance they can, if they try to hack their way through the jungle and the humidity is high, and they can catch themselves, one or more levels of exhaustion, and they're being hunted by predators, they might have to rethink their mode of travel. But if we can move on to talking about the exploration pillar, and we could talk a little bit more about the natural environment, because I do want to talk about like using the environment in the midst of combat. But I think too often we feel like if it's not a combat or a monster encounter, that the encounter doesn't matter. And I would contend to you that that shouldn't be the case. I mean, we have defaulted to that, but player characters trying to get across a raging river, or figure out the fastest way to get through a dense jungle, or make their way through a mountain pass that's dangerous with the sheer cliff sides around them, I think is just as important as an explorative measure than yet having one more monster encounter. Because unfortunately, with a combat encounter, the only way to survive it is, I mean, the only way to make success is it kills you or you kill it. And that doesn't give very many um, vectors for success or failure beyond the people who can fight the best. And that's why a lot of times when it comes to like class options or leveling up or feats and other mechanical pieces in a game, a lot of the things that are for role playing and or exploration tend to fall to the wayside because you can, in a vacuum, sure, the person that does the most damage and is the most combat effective is the most will be the most effective in a vacuum. But in your setting, if role playing is very important, if exploration is very important, it's very hard to measure those things when combat has hard numbers and is hard math. You can very easily figure that out. Someone having a criminal background and a connection in the criminal underworld in your setting, it's hard to figure out if that is that more effective than getting another stat bonus or something. It's hard to figure that out without knowing what setting you're in, and so a lot of times vacuums can be a little bit disingenuous when it comes to many of our role playing games. So when it comes to exploration as well, especially we're talking about Wakanda and Africa and such. When the movie opens up, we see our hero, you know, in a the first one of the first action scenes. T'Challa, the Black Panther, is in their Aerodyne craft and goes to attack a bunch of mercenaries on the road. And the first thing, of course, you notice is the technology that he's got, and of course, very easily jumps out the plane, drops like a stone, um, lands in the midst of them, throwing out these devices that stop their vehicles. And one of the things you notice in the battle is, of course, he's hiding behind vehicles. He's up in the trees. It's dark, which is another thing. There are individuals shooting their rifles off into the distance, and I think that's something that we don't incorporate into the game, which is one or more of the NPCs acting in a manner in which we have immersed ourselves into their eyes, right? How many times have you thrown in some bandits or whatever, and one of the PCs is like hiding in the woods or whatever, and have those people like just poke or prod or wander off into the distance, or like you know um look for shadows that aren't there. I mean, that's probably a very common thing, right? Oh, there's something in the dark. What is it? I hear some sounds. What's moving in the jungle? I don't know. And they go and spread apart. I mean, role playing. This is an opportunity for you as a game master to role play your adversaries. And sure, on a grid or a table or a virtual tabletop, or heck, even theater of the mind, it's pretty easy to go, oh, I've got 7 bandits and there's three PCs. Let's see what they do together. As opposed to like the NPCs going like, I don't know what's out there. Who's making that noise? Hey, one of us has just disappeared into the brush. What the hell happened? So using heights also isn't, I think, is something we often tend not to do. Climbing in the trees or on cliff sides or on top of I don't know, stacks of goods in a warehouse, or up and down a ship's mast or something. Heights are very important as well, especially when people tend to look at things at their eye level until evidence otherwise tells them to look up or down. And so someone hiding up in the rafters, or hiding on the eaves of a roof or on a balcony, or having the ability to defy gravity and float down from above, are pretty pretty smart tactically. And if your PCs don't have the opportunity to do it, or hell, the NPCs doing it to the PCs, you could throw a couple of monkey wrenches in there when using the environment. But of course, Black Panther kicks their asses pretty easily. Rips off car doors, kicks people into other vehicles, things of that nature. Bullets reflecting off of his suit and whatnot. And I think sometimes we as dungeon masters get a little bit we can get a little bit upset when our PCs wipe the floor with some of our encounters, but don't be too upset about that. I mean, what we did a whole week of badassery. Every once in a while, give the PCs, give them the slow clap and be like, okay, you kicked their asses pretty good, and now you can file away like, oh, I thought this challenge would be more difficult or balanced, but it wasn't. So I might have to ramp it up. But this time, just give it to them. Let them take the easy win, and let them feel like badasses and embrace it. Don't feel like you have to fight it. And by the way, game masters, here's a little weird thing to say. The games are actually kind of designed for you to lose. Uh, I know that sounds strange, but if you kill your PCs, there is no more gaming, right? I'm not saying that you should go light on them. I'm saying that the default nature is that things should be tough and maybe even lethal, but you kind of want them. You can make things as lethal as you want, but you also want to root for their success, because guess what? Those 85 hours you spent on world building doesn't matter if they can't adventure in your setting any longer. So the fact that they win isn't really a bad thing. It's actually a yet another opportunity for them to travel even further into your world and uncover all of your creative measures that you've put into your world. They'll never get to the Arctic North if they can't get through your jungle, and if they die in the jungle, your Arctic North storyline that you were like, oh, this is going to be 8 sessions long, dies on the vine, right? I'm going to have to use it some other time. So, moving on into the Black Panther movie in Wakanda, there is, because the old king T'Chaka has passed away, there is a battle that has to happen, a challenge for who will take the king's throne. And more often than not, you get this impression that the Black Panther tribe has held the reins for quite a long time. If not, tens of generations. Yet there is a challenge, and so that challenge must be met. And if that challenge happens in a region where they are fighting in, I would say, like ankle deep water on the sides of a cliff, with measures put in place to make the PCs more equitable. So, of course, the Black Panther has to take the herb to remove the strength of the arcane strength of the Black Panther flowing through T'Challa's body, and then they have a fight. Now, the ankle deep water is more flavor than an obstacle, actually, but it is possible to have a fight in water in a role playing game. Like, for example, in Dungeons and Dragons, when a player or NPC wants to grab their opponent and push their face down into the water, how do you adjudicate that? The typical rules allow you to hold your breath underwater for long enough that it won't make any combat sense, but you could reinterpret it with like con saves or challenges against maybe how much damage you've suffered, or require some sort of like grappling effect first before you could elicit this possibility that this individual could, gulp down, a substantial amount of water and start drowning and such. For those who don't know, if you start drowning in 5th edition, your hit points drop to 0 and you start making death saves. So you don't really want this to be too easy, but you want to make it possible. And so applying more strength, i.e. maybe it could be a con versus strength challenge. It could be a save versus the damage done to the individual after they've been grappled. You could come up with a number of things using the engine of the mechanisms you have at your disposal to do that. Also, when it comes to water, can you see through it? So if something falls into the water, a weapon gets someone gets disarmed, someone makes a critical fail, or maybe even a critical hit to break a weapon or sunder a shield or something, and it falls into the water. Are you able to discover where it is and what it is? Also, they're fighting on the edge of a cliff, and you guys have heard me say this plenty of times. Yet the push and shove maneuver, where you can knock someone prone or knock them or shove them 5 feet, isn't very effective unless you have a place to knock them into. And a cliffside is a pretty effective way to take out your opponent without having to do a lot of hit point damage, right? You knock somebody off of a half-kilometer high cliff, rolling for damage might not be that necessary, or cliff slash waterfall, right? Especially if all you want to do is get rid of that opponent as opposed to killing them. As was done by Killmonger, who lifted T'Challa up and threw him over the cliff like, he's dead. And of course, we find out he's not. But it sure did get rid of that opponent for a period of time long enough for him to take a seat on the throne and try to establish his order, right? So his new world order. So fighting on the side of a cliff, knowing that you can push your opponent closer and closer to the edge, is pretty threatening. A PC 5 feet away from the edge, fighting an opponent that's super strong, might have to, use some tactics to get the heck away from the edge, using some movement actions, maybe being forced to have to make a dex save or acrobatics check to move around someone who has cornered them. If there's some other obstacles in the way, stone or trees or something of that nature, that could also have an effect. Moving back a little bit back to the jungle idea, you could overlay with the environment, because I love the idea of overlaying obstacles onto what players have. Hey, what's up, Em? Up nice and early, man. Yeah, just still talking about doing the whole Black Panther thing all week long. The idea of a jungle, making it easier to find cover, making it more difficult to move through it, finding it difficult to use any kind of ranged attacks or weapons in a jungle. Also, what are some effects? Like, there are gaming effects where there's what is opportunity attacks. Like, if you move away from someone, there's an opportunity attack. Maybe the jungle is so thick it either prevents it completely, or you have with advantage and disadvantage, maybe you have disadvantage on being able to attack someone in that manner. So there's a lot of things that are there. Also, there's spell effects. I forgot about that. Lots of spell effects require you to see your target, whether it's an ally or an enemy. A jungle has a pretty significant disruption in that as well, especially when it comes to distance. Also, it could reduce movement, and might reduce movement in more ways than one. So not only might it be difficult terrain, but it's possible to even have a jungle growth so thick that it might even affect your dexterity mods, as we're talking about gaming mechanics and things like that. So moving on even further into the Black Panther movie, we've had a number of combat encounters, right? Where Killmonger releases Claw by using explosives and blowing out the wall, and he steals Claw and throws his shackled to a chair individual into a van and drives away with Claw cackling the entire time. We have the scene in the casino, which is pretty amazing, right? Where we use a lot of heights. There's a lot of people running around. There's a car chase attached to it. There's the explosion that goes off that knocks one or more of the protagonists and antagonists off of an upper balcony down onto the floor down below. There's the leaping off of a balcony to land on a card table or table where they're gambling to have a fight. And so just making things dynamic and fun and with the sound effects and the music and the chaos of people running for cover, I think is pretty amazing to do. And I think sometimes we sell ourselves short in how much the players will really remember that kind of scene, will really immerse themselves into a scene that way. And if you're not using a grid, there's a method from this is used plenty of times in other games, but I know Fate does this where instead of, especially for theater of the mind, instead of measured out regions, what they do is you can just pick areas and just name the areas. So for example, you could have the main casino floor, and that's one area. So if you want to move within that area, you're just in on the main casino floor, and then there may be, let's say, 2 or 3 balconies, as because you have the region that goes around the casino. So you could say to the left or to the west is one balcony, to the east is the other balcony, and then in the center is the third catwalk or something of that nature. And so if someone has, like, say, an area effect ability, like my character's so good with their spear that they can attack every enemy within my area. So if they're on the main gambling floor, okay, all those opponents down there are affected. If they are on the west side balcony area or catwalk or elevated region, they can affect everyone there. So you can use, for theater of the mind, you can just name regions. Also, let's go forward into the car chase. Chases, sometimes we think they're pretty hard to do in a role-playing game, but chase mechanics aren't as complicated as we like to think of them, because we, the brilliant gamers that we are, tend to try to embrace the simulation as part of it. Like, how do we modulate speed and, miles per hour or kilometers per hour, and maneuvering a vehicle and all that kind of stuff. But really, all that is just, it's still just game mechanics, right? If you think of a chase, especially in a video game, all a chase is, and follow me on this, it's not you following people moving at high speeds. What it is imagine all the action is stationary, but the environment keeps moving. So an example would be, if you're in a car chase, it's not important that you measure how fast everyone's going. All you really need to know is how difficult it is to maneuver, and then what next environmental effect is going to happen that is where the protagonist and antagonist are going to pass by. So an example would be, on round one, PCs and antagonist, protagonists get into automobiles. And so now you need to establish, okay, who's further ahead, how easy or how hard will it be for either side to either catch up or extend the distance away from the other. And that's very easy to do with, like, skill challenges, my driving skill against the opponent's driving skill. You could also throw in a couple of monkey wrenches, which is what happens in a chase, is that there are monkey wrenches thrown in. The typical, like, homeless person with the shopping cart full of cans, the lady with the baby carriage pushing across the street, the fruit cart that happens to be selling fruit at some god-awful hour at night, right? It's there's an obstacle in the way. That obstacle might slow me down or cause me to have some kind of disadvantages or, negative modifiers to my driving skill or something like that. Of course, we mixed in that chase, we mix in both driving and, of course, Black Panther being fast and acrobatic enough to run vertically along building walls and jumping and leaping from vehicle to vehicle. So you have a normal human being. So one character could be using their driving skill, another character using their acrobatic skill. Same thing, same engine, that kind of stuff. And then the disadvantages that happen along there, like, 3 failed driving checks. Okay, well, you come to a stop, basically. If you maybe make a critical failure, you might suffer some harm. Or Hey, I'm the game master. There's a big old 18-wheeler truck that's going to go out of control. You've got to here's your DC to difficult challenge to overcome it, and failure causes you damage, or you might be stunned or incapacitated or restrained because you're stuck in the wreckage, or you suffer fire damage because something explodes and starts burning. So you can throw a lot of those. You could make a list of six, eight, 3 or 4 dozen of these things that you can randomly roll, or maybe you say in your chase, wouldn't it be cool if, and you make a list like, okay, first there's a lady with the baby carriage and no one wants to hit them. Then we have the nuns crossing the street with the orphans, and then we have the puppies that are that are running. Like you could be pretty silly with that, or you could just make it very dangerous. Like, oh, there's city, the police are coming after you, so you have to, you not only are you going after your enemy, you have to extend your lead away from the authorities. Maybe there are people setting up barricades, or there's a crowd of stopped vehicles ahead, or there's a dead end if you go down the alleyway or something like that. So um, perception checks, investigation checks, maybe to know exactly which way you should turn. Do I go left or right? Do I go through the alleyway, or do I drive on the sidewalk or something? Of course, if you're talking about Dungeons and Dragons, automobiles won't really be in it unless that is your thing. But the chase rules still apply. If you're not driving an automobile, you're riding a war elephant, or an armored rhino, or a chainmail covered um, camel, or a giant scorpion, or whatever, the back of a flame snake or something. Like all those things, you're running on foot. Okay, no big deal, right? Or riding in a carriage, or carriage, wagon, chariot. You know, um, I think having those. I think we sell, and I have to include myself in this. I think sometimes we sell ourselves short because the simulation as part of our brain tells us this is going to be too hard to put into the game. But if we look at it a little bit deeper in a meta sense, it really isn't that much different, right? Like, imagine. I know it sounds strange for me to describe a chase as standing still, but imagine. Okay, let's take the carriage idea, right? It's being pulled by twin. What's something really cool, like twin lizards, and it's being pulled across the savannah, and the PCs are in the back of the carriage. Now imagine instead, right here's the meta part of my brain going. Imagine instead the player characters and their adversaries are standing still on platforms that are just shaking back and forth, right? And on the outside, you have people throwing, like, they're throwing sand in their face, and they're throwing water, and they're like, "Uh-oh, you're on the platform. The platform's going to shift. It's going to the lizards are supposed to be going down into a gully and coming up the other side. So, it's going to be dangerous. You might get flung out of the carriage. So, we're going to take this platform that was shaking a little bit, and we're going to violently pitch it forward and then pitch it back and see if you hold on, right? It's like it's the person that rides the mechanical bull in a bar. The mechanical bull's not going anywhere. It's just in a stable location. That's, if you think about a chase like that, that's what a chase is. There's a platform the PCs are on, whether they're on the back of a mount, or they're riding in a carriage, or they're hanging onto the railing onto a chariot or something. And yes, the landscape is moving by. That's the flavor part of it, right? So moving by very quickly, but it's like, oh, for next round, you have to worry about a sandstorm. And then the round after that, you're going to have to worry about a herd of bison or something, or the round after that, or maybe antelopes might be more appropriate, right? Or, the round after that, maybe this sandstorm should be the last thing, like in Mad Max Fury Road. But you get the point. You get what I'm saying, right? At least I hope so. And um, the other thing to take away from it is to not make this savor suck, to reduce the savor suck. Let's go with like Indiana Jones when it comes to this, because the save or suck part of that, I'll move away from Indiana Jones in a minute because we're talking about Wakanda. But the save or suck means that, like, if someone gets punched in the throat and they're riding on the back of a truck, or they're on a mount, Lord of the Rings, where Aragorn is fighting the orc warg riders, where they're fighting on those massive demonic, like, mutated, more like hyena hounds or whatever, and he's fighting a rider that's on it. It's If someone fails a die roll, you don't want to get them out of the action. But what you do want to do is escalate the harm that happens when you have multiple failures. So if someone's on the carriage and they get a spear gets thrown into their shoulder, you don't want them to make a save and see if you stay on the carriage, or you just fall off and you're out of the game. What happens is maybe somebody dangles off the side and their foot is caught in a rope, or they get pitched off the back of the chariot and they're holding on with their fingertips, or someone gets flung off the wagon and they're now have to hold on because they're between both of the giant lizards that are pulling the wagon across the savannah or something. So you want to give like you want to give consequences without like straight up getting killed, or that maybe there's a threat of them getting run over by the wheels or trampled or falling into the brush or riding along the side of a cliff face and they're being flung out while they're holding on with their fingertips to the railing on the edge of the chariot or something. Like, you really want to make it dynamic as much as possible. So getting back into exploring Wakanda and turning it into this dynamic, environmental location, we can't ignore the last fight down in the vibranium mines, right? Now, yes, I think we can all agree that the CGI in that was like a little bit like, it could have used a little bit more refinement. I think we can all agree on that. But that part of it wasn't the important part. It was the fight against basically Black Panther and was it Black Panther and Killmonger's was come on, somebody has to know this. I'm not going to look it up. And I'm surprised I don't know this. Bronze cheetah, copper, bronze, leopard. Oh, come on. Anyway, they combined two. Anyway, you guys get what I'm saying. Black Panther against Killmonger. Okay, so, jeez, in that fight, of course, we have the fall from a great height, right? Falling down into the vibranium mines. They also foreshadowed, and you can do this. I highly suggest foreshadowing, so you don't try to surprise your players with the "ha ha, you fell into a pit trap" thing. The anti-gravity vibranium mine carts that are traveling around the rail stations, I guess you would call them, or the mining. My brain is just not working this early in the morning. The mining cart on the rails, moving at hypersonic speeds, floating around inside the vibranium mound. And of course, during the fight, you guys have heard me say this. There's a lot of times where you can have static environments, escalating, random, timed events. And this is another thing where you foreshadow a timed event. Every certain period of time, here comes the anti-gravity carts full of vibranium, right? Okay, so you're fighting your enemy, you're fighting there on the rails, and then guess what you hear in the background? The tracks start to vibrate. You can the energy bars start to glow. Now, mind you can do this in any kind of effect. Like, for example, the PCs are down in the Underdark, and there's a dwarven mine, and every certain period of time, tons of ore get poured down in mine shaft, or the carts full of mined earth and ore and metal and alloys are the carts flow down the tracks while the PC is fighting their enemy on the tracks. And so now you have to make a decision. Okay, so maybe you roll initiative for when the stuff gets dumped in the midst of the PCs and the NPCs, right? So does the PC get to move in their initiative order before the stuff gets dumped into them? Or maybe they have to make deck saves to jump the heck up out the way. Or maybe they can finagle a way to get their enemy, or the enemy gets the PCs in the way of the danger, so that not only do they get to like kick their butt, but they also get smashed with this stuff that's coming down at them. Does it happen every round? Does it happen every other round? Do you roll a die 4 to see how many rounds it takes for yet some more crap to get dumped down the mine shaft or something? And mind you could do this. This applies across the board when it comes to the environment. This could be a white-capped wave sweeping over the deck of a storm-tossed ship. The same storm could be sweeping enemies and allies and protagonists and antagonists off the docks of a seaside village. This could be bolts of lightning striking out of the sky. I love myself some black necrotic lightning bolts. They're some of my favorite. You can also have like anything that you can time out, foreshadow the timing out of that, and then making that the hazard that can happen, whether it's blasts of flame or crackling, I don't know, the blinding light of radiance striking down from the sun, or any number of effects, right? That could happen. You're in a foundry or a forge or a factory where there are like presses and gears and things like that moving in and around the PCs. Live and Let Dice says the rails can also have serpentine turns and curves and multiple parallel rails at differing heights to allow acrobatic combat action. Oh, hells yes. in a mine shaft, right? Come on, you can't tell me you haven't seen this before, where people are trying to punch each other in the throat, and they're in a mine cart. And of course, the mine cart is like there's a steep dip where they get accelerated and they go down there is a possibility of getting thrown out the mine cart, and then the acceleration happens, and you have to worry about, well, if I go too fast, I'll get thrown off the tracks and into the side of a wall, or the tunnel suddenly narrows and anybody standing up is going to get the back of their head smashed in. And of course, someone gets their face and or other extraneous limbs rubbed against the rock in a minecart race. And the minecarts have like like the Temple of Doom. Hell yes. Minecart races, punching people in the throat, throwing them out of minecarts. The dueling mine carts where they start to separate and then come together, and like Live and Let Dice says, like the Dead Man says Star Wars Episode 2 Attack of the Clones had that. Sure did, where you're maneuvering around obstacles and then coming closer, and then you have the height differences happening where, like you say, acrobatic action. I'm going to leap from this one over to the other one and again punch somebody in the throat, right? I don't know why I'm stuck with the throat punching, but I happen to like it. Anyway, I mean, there's all those kind of things you can add. And how do you do that? Have foreshadow the thing happening for the action to happen the next round. Like, oh, you're in the minecart. By the way, the minecarts are going to be crossing each other at a crossroads in the Underdark, in the Dwarven mines or something. Do you really have to explain why it is? I get it that you're like, well, minecarts aren't really like that in real life. Sure, they aren't like that, but it's much like bullets don't make cars explode in real life. If you really want to embrace the cinematics of it, just go with it. And if your players are cool with it or they're having fun, no, minecarts don't have dips and dives and flip over each other and all. No, they don't in real life. But the cinematics of it are a thing, you know? And That's where you really want those things to happen. When Indiana Jones is punching people in the throat again with trucks and tanks and riding on horses and all that kind of stuff, it's like, yeah, you want the person to throat punch for as long as the chase needs to be, right? You want the chase to go on. Like, how long is the chase? The chase is as long and as necessary as the plot demands, right? You want a minecart race? How many different difficulties do you want in the minecart race? As many as the enjoyment lasts, and that's the meta of it. Live and let dice says, Em's like, Em's like, yeah, facts, absolutely, yeah. How long does it take? I don't know how long. How much enjoyment do we want? If it's still fun, let's keep it going. If it starts to get boring or tedious, or like everyone's like, this isn't working, guess what? It ends. Right? Live and Let Dice says random spark showers can blind people or burn people in combat. Yep. Metal can vibrate heavily enough to require strength and dex checks not to be tossed around. Hell yes. Maybe there's like, let's go with the debris dumping, right? Maybe the minecart speeds past an area where they're dumping ore into the next minecart that comes by, and you happen to be in one of them. So of course you want to go faster past the tons of ore that's getting dumped into it, but maybe you have to hold on or hope that you release the brake to go fast enough so it doesn't dump on top of you. Side note, initiative rolls in Dungeons and Dragons are ability checks. So you can have an ability check challenge against the obstacle in front of them by having them make initiative rolls. And you don't have to reestablish the initiative order. You can just go, hey, because rolling initiative is dex based in Dungeons and Dragons. So maybe you go, you roll your dice secretly and you're like, okay, I rolled a 12 for this event. All right, guys, you know what? You're going to have to figure out how to get past this obstacle real fast. And you're like, man, if they dump the ore on the tracks, we're probably going to get flung off the tracks, right? And you as the DM are like, yep. So what are you going to do? Well, I'm the fastest one. I'm going to take the brake off and see if we can move as fast as possible. All right, give me a dex roll. Give me an initiative roll. Give me an ability check. Whatever the case might be. By the way, I don't know what skill it would be to manipulate a minecart, but it sure would be fun to figure it out, right? Don't get lost in the details. Embrace the cinematics and then figure everything out later, right? Come to an agreement like, well, is it a vehicle? I have proficiency with vehicles, and you go, this really doesn't fit, but I really like that idea, so hell yeah, go ahead. What are some other things? Moving a little bit back to that last fight in the vibranium mines, right? Like Live and Let Dice was saying, like random sparks. There was if we noticed as the vibranium was passing by, their costumes are made of the same material. So we also foreshadowed the fact that the vibrations from the vibranium energy was also causing them to have some debilitating effects with their protective outfits, right? The same thing could happen with magic. Maybe there's like pulses down a ley line, and the pulses down the ley line mean that, I don't know, spells of third level or higher just aren't possible because the energy is being drawn, or you have to make an arcana check to really pull upon the weave of magic to cast a spell when the mine carts are passing by with the arcane ore that's being dug up from the Underdark or something. Like, you could have all kinds of weird, strange, cool, disruptive things happening. Live and Let Dice says toxic dust can bleed damage in to force the party through or make for interesting, clever solutions. Yep, being in in these mine shafts with the blinding dust, because like toxic dust can choke you, which means it'll be hard for you to verbalize, i.e., verbal components for spells, right? Hard to see, so you may have to go around blind corners or not see a corner or drop or broken rails or what have you ahead of you, so you have to worry about that. The dust could coat one or more of the PCs or NPCs, making it hard for them to see beyond what's happening ahead. Like maybe their goggles get covered. The gnomish tinkerer in the party's goggles are covered in this toxic dust or something. Again, you could make poison saves to keep from passing out or choking, damn near choking to death or something. Living That Life says this can also force rogues to be less stealthy, really nasty, especially if they're covered in dust and making tracks or something. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to challenge the party, and I can hear some people saying, "Well, you're all you're doing is nerfing my character," and I would contend to you, nerfing only applies when there's permanency involved. Otherwise, it's called a challenge, right? It's my barbarian can only attack things in hand-to-hand combat, but the manticore's flying overhead. That's not nerfing your character. That's a challenge. That gives a spotlight to some other people, right? In this encounter, no, you're not as effective. In the next encounter, you might be. Or maybe changing the circumstances. Oh, my barbarian's going to climb up the cliff face so that the manticore has to face me, at its own height, and I'm going to try to jump on its back or something like that, right? So it's all that kind of stuff. Malika says, if there's a combustible dust or gas in the mines, this can create a challenge, a challenge if you're using it. Yeah, absolutely. Like, oh, maybe those sparks. Remember, Live and Let Dice mentioned sparks off the rails with the metal rubbing against metal, but everyone's like, I smell something. It's like, ooh, is that methane gas or something? I.e., do you travel fast causing sparks and possibly ignite the gas, but you get to move ahead to go after your enemy? Or do you move slower so you don't set off the sparks, thereby not igniting the gases at all? Yep, weapons or sparks from the carts. Of course, you got PCs. Listen, if there's a chance to light something on fire, there's going to be a PC that's going to do it, right? There's always some pyromancer or, I don't know what it is that we love playing with matches in role-playing games. But, yeah, give the opportunity for something to catch on fire, and it will. But maybe the PCs have to take that minecart through that ball of fire that was accidentally created from the sparks and whatnot. So these are the things I think that the environment and the exploration pillar of gaming. Yeah, we got our combat pillar, we got our social interaction pillar, but I think this is the one that we really leave atrophied. We don't pull on it enough, and I think it's something that's really cool. You can always listen if you find it difficult or you're like scared of using it, just add just a little spice in it, just a little bit. I'm not saying, take a deep dive and go 100 different environmental encounters. Woo! No. Just a little bit. Live and Let Dice says dwarven petroglyphs could make for some interesting flavor that can be mixed with thieves' cant for more cultural world-building deliciousness. Somebody, I think, like in Live and Let Dice are making some really nice sandwiches here. Yeah, I mean, why not? Like, what if there's like dwarven glyphs that are like, hey, listen, please don't spark a fire around here, i.e. foreshadowing. I think that's the problem with traps. Traps are in general described as gotchas, right? You don't know what the trap is, you don't see the trap goes off, boom, you're hurt. As opposed to foreshadowing the danger. There's nothing wrong with telling player characters, guess what? There's something dangerous ahead, because now you give them the option to either go through the danger to get an easy risk harm by going through the danger, or risk time by avoiding the danger. Right? You don't have to go across the raging river. You don't have to get in the mine cart. You don't have to pass through the poisonous gases with the sparks flying off the wheels. But on the other hand, it's like, well, you don't have to, but your enemy sure is getting away, and they stole a couple of copper pieces from you. You sure do want to lay the smackdown on them, right? And it's like, yeah, let's risk it. Let's do it. Give them the opportunity to like really embrace the fact that they are adventurers, and getting in danger is part of the game. Yeah, Malika's like, beware of characters that smoke within the game if that's their struggle or drawback. Yeah, you got to be careful with it. Always got that smoker that's like, I can't wait to light something on fire. Smoke. But anyway, the let's not only were there a number of battles and things that happened in the Black Panther movie, but we even had the big battle that was on the at the on top of the vibranium mound outside. I'm referring to those armored rhinos, which is kind of like a bulletproof vessel in Superman. But whatever the case may be, these raised armored rhinos. I'm sure they're raised for their speed and intellect and aggression and armored plates and razor sharp horns. But whatever the case may be, of course we had Black Panther. Actually, there was a really great scene where you get to see Black Panther, where he's got like the almost got the head shaking, his arms out, where you see like the heat waves coming up. To me, I love that. Where in the foreground you see the heat waves, and then in the background you see Black Panther walking up to ready to beat ass with Killmonger. But we also have a lot of NPCs running around. You could give those NPCs to the player characters. Like, okay, you control the Dora Milaje, and you control the Border Tribe, and the Border Tribe were actually the enemies. Ooh, and guess who shows up? M'Baku and the Jabari tribe from the White Ape tribe. They show up to help out, right? And Living Let Dice is like owlbears in armor for baddies to have subterranean gladiator matches and rancor substitutes. Oh, and I gotta add in the twist, twist, twist. Yeah, definitely. Hell yes. Hell's yes. Rancor substitutes, of course. Well, Star Wars came out in '77. Dungeons and Dragons was about that time. Although the Rancor was later. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? But yeah, man, I like you. There's so many great, and like you said, said Dice. So many different things we can add in that are delicious. And okay, let's go with the owlbears in armor, the Rancor substitute idea, right? Player characters going through the Underdark. Maybe they have to swing or climb or scramble across maybe a narrow ledge that's over top of the pit where the armored owlbears are kept in a pen. So maybe, just maybe, they don't really have anything to do with the encounter, but it's like, hey, we need to avoid these monsters. This isn't just an encounter. We just need to like narrowly, scramble across this ledge to get to the next point in the adventure, with the threat that if somebody attacks me while I'm going across this ledge, I'll fall down into the pit of owlbears, right? Deadman says Superman had power armor for enemies that he knew had kryptonite. Yeah, I know. That's the old. I remember the 60s, 70s Superman that had the little capsule, that he had the little arms that he could control out of the thing. Yeah, I know. Whatever. Of course, Superman's got everything because he's the master superhero, and you can't have any challenges for him. Eye roll. Anyway, we've come towards the end of our broadcast here. Listen, we could go on and on and on about my love of the exploration pillar of tabletop games. There is a playlist of us talking about Third Pillar Thursdays. I mean, like right now, we gave you a host of ideas from you guys in the chat for minecart races and Underdark challenges and things. And there's so many things you can add into it. Flooding chambers and falling stalactites and weaving around stalagmites. And we brought up poisonous gases and flammable gases down there. We have crumbling earth and climbing cliffs faces and trying to squeeze through narrow passages, so on and so forth. And that's not really even including magic into all of this, right? We didn't include illusionary walls. We didn't include, I don't know, floating enemies that are down in the Underdark. We didn't toss in a bunch of enemies incorporated into and mixed in and around these kind of things. So I feel like it's the unrecognized hero in the tabletop RPG community, the environment itself, that I feel is undeserved. And unfortunately, we've gotten to the point where, if I can get on my soapbox here, let me step up on that. I feel like the idea of using the environment has been relegated to passivity. I can passively find food and water and shelter for my allies. I can passively feed them food and drink with magic. I can passively use a spell to make sure that we have perfect shelter, right? There's not very much activity, skill rolls, challenges involved in it. And yes, I understand that it allows us to more focus on the action of our tabletop RPG content, but I feel like it was unserved, because I think there's so much more action we can find just exploring everything. And most of our favorite intellectual properties have our heroes doing a lot of amazing things. So anyway, guys, thank you very much for joining me. Tomorrow is Future Friday, where we get to talk about Afrofuturism on Future Friday. So guys, join me there. And of course, this is definitely going to be the end of our talk about Black Panther, Wakanda, and celebrating the life and legacy of the person who was allowed to bring us these amazing things to the big screen. So guys, everyone, have a great one. Please, oh, by the way, please like, share, subscribe. Just really embrace the idea of letting people know about everything good and amazing about this channel. Thank you very much. And again, thank you for watching. Bye. See you later.